How about that? Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Bronson, president of the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners. Sorry, Tommy. I forgot to give you the nod. Abbreviated as TBCE or simply the board. I call this meeting to order. The date is August 1, 2024, and the time is 9:04 a.m. The board secretary, Dr. Michael Henry, will call the roll.
Thank you, Dr. Bronson. I'm going to call the roll and just respond with here or present, please, if you are in the room. Dr. Mark Bronson.
Here.
Mr. Joshua Holub. Not present. Mindy Neal, D.C. Dr.
Here.
Neal? Thank you. Dr. Nicholas Bockham.
Here.
Dr. Matthew Mix.
Here.
Dr. Michael P. Henry, present. Sarah Abraham. Brandon Allen. Not present. And Dr. Scott Wofford.
Present.
Thank you.
So Dr. Henry and all, we have 6 board members present today out of a 9-member board. I affirm that a quorum is established. Honorable board members and Team TBCE, thank you for your ongoing service and for preparing your reports for this meeting. Guests and stakeholders, welcome. Our agenda includes a place for you to share your concerns or advice. Agenda item number 6 allows for public comments. I'll consider each of your requests individually and either invite you to speak then, or I might ask you to wait until we reach our agenda item corresponding to your concern. I'm planning to recognize individually 3 people in attendance today during my president's report, which is agenda item number 3. As chairman of this meeting, I reserve the right to alter the order of the agenda, and I don't anticipate doing that at this time. So agenda item number 2 calls for discussion and action to approve the minutes for the board meeting held on May 23rd, 2024. I'm not aware of any amendment proposals. Has any board member not received and reviewed these minutes, and does any board member require a discussion on the May 23rd, 2024 minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the board meeting of May 23rd, 2024.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Dr. Neal made the motion, and Dr. Wofford seconded the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We did have a special board meeting July 19th, 2024. Those minutes will be available at our next board meeting. We have 2 guests. We have 2 guests in waiting. I was just notified. Okay. Agenda item number 3 is the President's report. And so here we go. I'd like to first review the events since our last board meeting on May 23rd. So following that, on June the 8th, NBCE Part 4 Test Development Committee met at the headquarters in Greeley, Colorado. Dr. Matthew Mix represented the board at that event. Thank you, Dr. Mix, for doing that.
You're welcome. Yep. Thank you.
June 28th through 30th was TCA's Chirotexpo Annual Convention and Exposition in Frisco, Texas. The agency staffed a booth in a very accessible space provided by the TCA so we could disseminate information and answer questions from licensees and the public. We thank the TCA for allowing us to use their space for this outreach project. I attended many of the educational sessions, including the 4 board hours, which were presented by attorney Wade Emmert. I also attended the 4 hours of CE specifically required of our acupuncture permit holders, who must attend 8 hours per 2-year renewal. And I think that my attendance at as many of those courses as possible is important so that I can promote compliance with scope of practice, and the limited use of needles which are non-incisive. On July 11th and 12th, our ED Executive Director interview team, consisting of Dr. Henry, Dr. Wofford, and me, accompanied by Lisa Agarwal, Human Resources, Joseph McLaughlin, General Counsel, and Jennifer Herzenberg, Interim Executive Director, met here in the Bush Building for 2 days of interviewing applicants. I reported our applicant pool, interview process, scoring method, and our final appraisals to the governor's staff per their request. On July 19th, we held a special called board meeting for the purpose of allowing the full board to hear the interview team's recommendations and to vote on a motion to hire a new executive director. On July 27th, the NBCE Part 4 pilot exam was administered on the University of North Texas campus in Denton. 16 volunteer students participated in this test as examinees. Each individual testing station was video recorded. Then, upon viewing the recorded encounters, 3 newly trained examiners, including myself, will, after we meet up again, we will grade the examinees' performances. My participation was not based on my position on this board, although it allowed me a firsthand experience of the new exam format. Future events. On September 22 through 26, Governor's Executive Development Program, the GEDP, the first module will be given. That's a University of Texas program. And prior to Mr. Fortner's move, he offered this to me and submitted my application. Or at least started it. Jennifer has completed that application process. My attendance would require me to take a week off from work at home, but I think would be a valuable training for the benefit of our board and those we serve. I don't know if I will be selected or not, but it is possible. And then on this coming November 8th through 10th, the National Board Part 4 administration will be in Dallas. I'll serve as chief examiner under a contract not associated with my position on this board, while Dr. Mix will represent our board, joining our team of about 40 DC examiners who will be grading the clinical skills of other DCs or students as one of their requirements for licensure. And then on October 31st, the next board meeting will be held here in the Bush Building at 9 a.m. So now I get to recognize a very special person, Mr. Patrick Fortner, who is understandably a bit uncomfortable sitting in the audience today. But I do want to share with everyone here a bit about Patrick and his service. And I wrote it out so that I didn't forget anything. This is too important to screw this up. Prior to Mr. Patrick Fortner's hire as Executive Director of the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners in 2018, the agency was struggling to accomplish daily operations and to meet some critical reporting deadlines. Key personnel, including the Executive Director, General Counsel, and the Financial Director, had just resigned. Enforcement and investigative files were stacking up. Our portion of the Texas Administrative Code lacked structure and clarity, causing uncertainty among licensees and the public. Morale was low, I hear, among the remaining agency staff, whose members worked long hours to accomplish essential functions. Mr. Fortner stepped in and restored order in the office, implementing emergency initiatives to relieve staff members of the heavy burden placed on them. He restructured the organization and prioritized staff development. Thanks to 2 key employees taking on greater responsibilities, that's at least 2, he was able to outsource many of the remaining financial director duties at a fraction of the cost of a replacement employee. This strategy not only saved the agency money, but more importantly, salvaged and rebuilt our existing human resources into trusted and valued team leaders. Meanwhile, Mr. Fortner ensured implementation of sunset directives from the prior year and created a strategic plan to present to the legislature prior to the fast approaching deadline. With the payroll savings, he hired a general counsel who masterfully drafted agency rules that are clear, concise, and logically organized in the administrative code. This has greatly reduced the burden on staff to field questions from licensees and other stakeholders. Within his second year as ED, Mr. Fortner restructured the investigative and enforcement department. Meanwhile, following extensive interaction with the state's Department of Information Technology, Mr. Fortner finally procured a new database currently under implementation. He then created a new staff position, Chiropractic Director or Clinical Director, for providing standard of care opinions to our enforcement division. Within 4 years of team building, strategic planning, and implementation, he converted an agency literally in crisis to this award-winning, highly efficient organization where people want to work and which provides efficient service to our licensees and the public. Remarkably, and to Mr. Fortner's credit, TBCE had no staff turnover for over 5 years. Patrick, please accept this award as a token of our appreciation for your outstanding service.
Now you got to make a speech. Get more out of it.
It's not like you don't know how to do this.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Y'all give me way too much credit. They did the work. I've always believed that you should build your staff up. You should train your staff. You should teach them things as much as you can, and then get out of their way. I mean, y'all have heard me say this a million times. I was a goalie. My job, if the puck came to me, yeah, I grabbed it and made sure no one got past me. But then I put it back in play and let y'all, keep moving down the ice. And I've never played hockey in my life, so. Y'all all know. This was not a move that I wanted to make. It was a move that I think, in a lot of ways, was forced upon me. And we'll just leave it at that. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I would like to thank the board for always having my back. I know some of the ideas and thoughts that I had, you were like, really? Okay. I appreciate the fact that y'all trusted me. I appreciate the fact that y'all allowed me to trust them, because again, okay, my wife has my stamp that has my signature on it. I didn't rubber stamp what they did. It was always a collaborative effort, but at the end of the day, they knew I had their back. I knew y'all had my back, and just as importantly, I knew you supported them through me. And you're getting a good crew. down there and behind me too. I've known Boyd since my GDP class, and like I said, you're getting a good crew, and I trust him to have your back too. So I'm going to shut up now before I start crying. Five. I gave you almost six
Oh, we
and
were
a half.
close. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, appreciate it.
Awaiting the formalities of onboarding as our new executive director and an orientation, Dr. Walton Boyd Bush, who goes by Boyd, will get a key to his new office in the TBCE suite. Boyd, remember to push floor button 10, not 8, where you were executive director of the dental board, and you can't get lost. We're certainly looking forward to having you and your leadership. And thank you for being here today.
I got hard shoes to fill this way, especially. My jokes won't be as corny, I promise.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
And Boyd, your official first day is August
August the 6th,
Tuesday, August 6th. Meanwhile, our incredibly capable and dedicated Jennifer Herzenberg has once again demonstrated her commitment to the chiropractic community and the public, but especially to this board, to every person on staff, and to me. When asked to serve as interim executive director, she accepted the challenge without hesitation, and she assured me, quote, "I won't let you down." Well, Jennifer, you certainly have not let me down. Instead, you've taken my appreciation for you to a new level. Ordinarily, with a standing ED, I'm not necessarily included in correspondence with the agency's personnel, but now, to ensure checks and balances, you've copied me on all the correspondence. And let me just say that I'm so grateful that you've been here to serve as not only continuing as Director of Operations, but as our interim ED. Thank you. Agenda item number 4 calls for board committee reports. Committee chairs, when I call on you, please acknowledge your committee members and summarize your activities. First up, Rules Committee, Dr. Michael Henry, Chair.
Thank you. So the Rules Committee's been busy this last interim between our last board meeting, and we outlined 6 priorities we wanted to work on. One was introducing a close for compliance rule to allow our executive director and team to close with no violation or letter of warning certain complaints. We are working on using stakeholder input that we have had through a couple of stakeholder meetings on updating a business practices rule, which will address prepaid treatment plans and update that rule. We're also using the stakeholder input that we got from our last stakeholder meeting on CE to create a CE rule, and we've been working with the Education Committee on that. And we're looking at avenues to bring registration of business entities that employ Texas licensees into the structure to help us better regulate some of the non-DC owned clinics. We also have on our radar that we need to update our scope of practice rule and the acupuncture rule, since we did not do that while there was litigation pending, but by statute, we do have to review those on a certain period, and those are coming up due for review. So those are kind of our 6 priorities, and we're going to take care of a couple of those today, and the rest should be coming out in the next 2 board meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Board members, any questions for Dr. Henry? Before I move on, I want to extend my president's report for another brief moment and recognize another person, Lisa Agarwal. Lisa, my appreciation for you has stepped up to a new level as well with your human resources role, your participation on the interview committee, and your leadership through it all is to be commended. Thank you so much. Enforcement Committee, Dr. Nicholas Balcom.
Thank you. Well, enforcement met on July 29th, 2024. That was our only meeting since we last met. Everything's running really smoothly in enforcement right now. I got to commend the enforcement team with Joe and the Chris's. It's just been extremely efficient, and we've really stayed on top of the cases that we've got. Only just anecdotally, we seem to have seen an uptick in prepaid treatment plan violations. So I think that, going along with the rules committee, I think that's going to be a good thing to get on top of. But that's all I've got.
And those violations were as a result of complaints that we've received,
Correct.
Of course.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Dr. Balcom? The Education Standards Committee, Dr. Scott Wofford.
Dr. Neal and Dr. Abraham are on this committee, and this last quarter we have had 2 applications that were approved for continuing education, so it's been very light and very easy. So only 2, and they were both approved.
Thank you, Dr. Wofford. Board members, any questions for Dr. Wofford? Licensing Committee is chaired by Dr. Sarah Abraham, who's not present. Agenda item number 5 calls for reports from our Executive Director and agency staff. Executive Director Jennifer Herzenberg.
Good morning, Team Chiro. I didn't know you could cut onions so well, so thank you for that. A lot of things in my report you've also included in yours, so I'll try to be brief. And I've tried to update you weekly on some of these things, so it may be a repeat of information, but just so we have it on the record. Nikhil, Lisa, and I worked with our database provider, it's Abaco Data, to renew our contract and encumber some funds for a continuing education module and a licensure portal. This portal will be something that our licensees will be able to log into and see how many hours they have a year or when they're due to renew. It's going to be very interactive and will make things easier, not only for our licensees, but for our licensing staff as well. We're hoping to reduce the amount of phone calls that our licensing department receives. And it's going to streamline the continuing education process for me, approving, entering rosters, continuing education audits, things of those nature. The next thing I have are our outreach events. Patrick, Lisa, and I traveled to Southlake, Texas. We attended the TSABA conference. It's the State Agency Business Administrators Association, which is a mouthful to say out loud. Lisa and I attended as attendees, and Patrick was the MC for the event, and he did an outstanding job at that event. Next was Chiropractic Expo. Our licensing team, Patrick and Walling, traveled to Frisco. We had a booth provided to us by the TCA, who we thank for that outreach opportunity. Most recently, last weekend, Sarah, Jaron, and I attended TCC Homecoming in Galveston, Texas. We had a few speaking opportunities. Michelle Quattlebaum invited me to speak during the 4 board hours and the human trafficking hour, so I was able to speak with our licensees about best practices for email and human trafficking awareness training, how important that requirement is to their license renewal. Sarah spoke at our Next Gen seminar. She spoke with the new licensees and students about how to be licensed and answered any questions that they had. We're doing the monthly webinars with NACA Texas with Michelle and Kathy Jones. I believe Chris Walling and I join on different days and just talk to the licensees about important things that we're seeing come across our desk on a monthly basis. And then Sarah, Jared, and I will be traveling to Texas Chiropractic College on August 20th. We'll be talking to the Tri-10 students about the licensing process, continuing education requirements, the human trafficking awareness training, how to be licensed. Joe recently attended the Senior Management Development Training in San Antonio. It was a 2-week course. He just finished last week as well. I'm very excited to see him implement all those skills that he learned. Do you want to talk about the course at all?
Absolutely. I'd like to start by actually thanking Patrick specifically for bringing that to my attention and giving me the gentle shove out the door to go ahead and sign up for it. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to meet and interact and dialogue with high-level employees at other state agencies as well. So I got to do some networking. As far as the skills covered, it's obviously a lot of soft skills stuff, which is certainly something that's important for any state employee. But I learned a lot about myself. I would say that's actually probably the most important part from the whole event. I could probably actually bore you with some of the evaluations we did and what I learned about myself. So. But again, I'm just thankful to the agency, thankful to Jennifer for making my travel arrangements and making sure I had a place to sleep at night, and reimbursement for feeding myself. So, but yeah, it was, like I said, a wonderful opportunity. And for any state employee who has the opportunity to attend, I would highly recommend it.
I second that. I was able to attend it last year as well, and it was a great opportunity. Since our last meeting, we have onboarded 2 new employees. We have Tommy Hughes, who is our legal assistant. He is awesome at answering the phones. He is so great. He is here on time every morning, leaves on time when he's supposed to, and he answers that phone. Like, one ring, he's on it. We have also onboarded Amy Fonk. She is our DFW investigator. We are so happy to have you on board. We are fully staffed and so excited. And we will be onboarding Dr. Bush on August 6th. We're so welcome. We're so glad to have you to be a part of our amazing team. So, and then what else? I received an FCLB scholarship to attend the District 4 meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona. I will be traveling on October 3rd through the 6th, and Dr. Bronson will be going to Asheville, North Carolina on September 12th through the 15th. We decided we would go to 2 separate places so we could get a more collaborative with the different states. How many states do you think between the 2 of us?
40.
40. So, and then LAR updates. The LAR instructions were just released last week. So far, we have finalized our 26-27 budget structure and performance measures, and we're working on exceptional items and working with our accounting consultant, Diane Fulmer. This is going to be due August 16th, and I'm sure we'll be working with Boyd to get everything finalized and ready to go. And I think that's it. I want to thank the board for the opportunity for me to be interim executive director. It's been my greatest honor in my 17 plus years of service to this board. So I appreciate the trust that you had in me. And I want to thank our amazing team for answering all my questions and putting up with me for the past month. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate all of you very much. And thank you for letting me lead this great team, if even for a month. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn the mic back over to you for Director of Operations report, if you have one, I just want to. Okay, of course. But let me recognize Mr. Joshua Holla, board member, who is now here. And so we now have 7 out of 9 board members present, still with the quorum.
All right, for the Director of Operations report, in your materials, there's a financial report as of July 19th, listing all of our expenditures and revenues. As we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, which is August 31st, you'll notice some things are starting to go into the red, but not to worry, we still have a healthy budget, and we're on track to collect our revenues by the end of the fiscal year. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board members? Okay, let's hear from our Director of Licensing, Sarah Matthews.
Morning, members. I have included in your materials a licensing dashboard that shows the licensing stats for the third quarter of fiscal year 2024. The licensing department is staying busy processing license renewals and license applications. Jared has been very busy working on scanning professional files into our Laserfish repository. We have a little bit of a backlog, was down for a little bit, so he's working on getting those back in there. Jennifer already mentioned June 27th through the 30th. Jennifer, Patrick, Chris Walling, Jared, and I, we attended the TCA Chiropractic Expo in Frisco. And this past weekend, we attended TCC convention in Galveston. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let's go now. Thank you, Sarah. Let's go to our Director of Enforcement, Chris Walling.
Thank you, members. Appreciate you. Since the last time we met, and there's a little typo in here, but it says 26, but we've opened up, we reviewed over 28 cases. Administratively closed were 10 of those cases. 7 of them were administratively closed. 1 was referred to a law enforcement agency, and 3 of those were cease and desist orders for people practicing without a license. Cases that we sent this month to our enforcement committee, there were over 18 cases. 5 of those were recommended as no violations. And then 13 were recommended for violations. However, we ended up with 2 of those being non-violations after they were reviewed, so we had 7 non-violations. Out of those 28 cases, we had Dr. Corbin review standard of care reviews, 6 of those cases, which she helped us with on those cases. The top violations that we've now seen, it's kind of changed a little bit, but we've been seeing a lot of practicing without a license. That basically coming from complaints where individuals either have let their license expire, or we've had the school of I can't think of the name. Alphabotics come about, where they're doing a service that is actually chiropractic, but they claim it's more of a religious service. We've been seeing a little bit more of unprofessional conduct and some failed to report convictions lately that have come about. And that's my report. So any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Walling. Board members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is reserved for public comments. The board will now entertain general comments from the public on matters not listed elsewhere in this agenda. Your comments are important to us, so please share your concerns openly, understanding that a 3-minute presentation is customary. As I mentioned earlier, if your comment corresponds to an item on our agenda, we'd prefer to hear your concerns during our discussion on that topic. I do have a public registration form from Dr. Steve Tullius? Yes, sir. And you indicated that you do want to speak, correct? Yes. So please come up. There's a table right up here with a microphone. If you would just make yourself comfortable, turn on your microphone and share with us.
All right. Good morning. Thank you. Good day, members of the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners. My name is Dr. Steve Tullius, and I'm here representing the Chiropractic Society of Texas on behalf of Dr. Scott Kelly to express our strong opposition to the Recognized Chiropractic Specialties Program and the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards. We have the following legal and ethical concerns. Number one is erosion of state regulatory authority. The RCSP undermines the authority and autonomy of state regulatory boards. By delegating the approval of specialty programs to the FCLB's RCSP, the state board would relinquish its critical oversight responsibilities. This delegation is not only unnecessary but legally questionable, as it could be seen as an abdication of the board's statutory duty to regulate.
Excuse me, Dr. Tullius. I'm sorry. Is this in regards to agenda item number 13?
I'm not sure if it is the RCSP on agenda item 13.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's we have some materials that we were gonna the board members should have received, and they're gonna have a discussion on it.
Perfect.
Originally, we were gonna have a presentation, but she wasn't able to attend. So,
okay.
Joe,
we have the materials. I'd like to hear what the CSTs has to say on that now, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. Do you want to go ahead and go out of order for...
Okay with it? If you're okay with it, to go ahead and hear what he has to say now, and then just so you'll know, this is our agenda item number 13.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't recognize that it was listed
so
there.
you could use your time now or then, but not both.
Perfect. I'll be happy to continue now if that's okay with
Apologies for the interruption.
Okay. No worries. And so we feel this is not only unnecessary but legally questionable, as it could be seen as an abdication of the board's statutory duty to regulate the practice of chiropractic in Texas. Number two, we see it as a conflict of interest and lack of transparency. The leadership of FCLB and RCSP is deeply entangled with state regulatory boards, trade organizations, and private corporations within chiropractic, creating significant conflicts of interest. The FCLB is a member of a secretive group called the Chiropractic Summit, operating within chiropractic and making trade and policy decisions that affect the entire profession. Key figures in the RCSP hold concurrent positions within the FCLB, state boards, chiropractic trade organizations, and private corporations. These overlapping roles compromise the impartiality and transparency required for fair and ethical regulation. Number three, redundancy and financial burden. Chiropractic schools and its postgraduate programs are already overseen by the Council on Chiropractic Education and regional accrediting bodies. The RCSP introduces redundant oversight, imposing additional financial and administrative burdens on educational institutions and specialty program providers. These costs are ultimately passed down to students and practitioners, straining the resources of our educational system and postgraduate providers without providing additional value. Number 4, undermining educational autonomy. The RCSP threatens the autonomy of chiropractic schools and specialty program providers by imposing standardized criteria that may not align with the unique needs and innovative approaches of individual programs. The standardization stifles innovation and limits the diversity of educational opportunities available to chiropractors. Regarding ethical implications, we feel that there's a compromising integrity. The incestuous relationships between FCLB, RCSP, state boards, and private corporations raise serious ethical concerns. The potential for bias and undue influence is high, jeopardizing the integrity of regulatory process. The situation can lead to decisions that favor the interests of the FCLB over those of the profession and the public. And finally, the public trust. Maintaining public trust in the chiropractic profession requires transparent and independent regulation. The RCSP's control over specialty program approval undermines this trust as it creates a perception of regulatory capture and conflict of interest. It is imperative that the board maintains its independence to safeguard public confidence in our profession. The use of state tax dollars to fund the chiropractic board's involvement with the FCLB and this is coupled with the FCLB receiving the bulk of its funding from student loan debt via the National Board of Chiropractic Examiners. Given these complicated and financially driven relationships between the state board and these private corporations and trade coalitions, we call for a detailed investigation of these relationships to assure the citizens of Texas that there are no state or federal laws and or ethical rules potentially being violated. In conclusion, the RCSP and the broader influence of the FCLB pose significant legal and ethical challenges. We urge the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners to reject the RCSP and any further encroachment by the FCLB on state regulatory authority. It is vital to preserve the board's autonomy, maintain the integrity of our regulatory processes, and protect the interests of our educational institutions and the public. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quick, I apologize. A copy of that letter was sent to me by Dr. Kelly yesterday. I neglected to share that with you, so I apologize, but I actually just sent it to you now, so you should all have a copy of it in your email inbox, so you can refer to it back if you need to.
Okay, thank you. We would also welcome any further. Oh, sir. We would also welcome any supportive documentation for some of the things that you mentioned in your presentation. Okay, thank you. Give me just a moment. Agenda item 7 involves requests to sit for the Texas jurisprudence examination pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.304A2. In a moment, I'll call upon our Director of Licensing, Sarah Matthews, to introduce each request individually. We do have just one, it appears. And then board members, following discussion, I'll entertain a motion and recognizing the one that I hear first. Sarah.
Thank you, Dr. Bronson. Agenda item 7A is a consideration request for applicant Brody Leroy to sit the Texas jurisprudence exam. Mr. Leroy seeks chiropractic licensure in the state of Texas. Applicant is requesting approval to take the Texas jurisprudence examination. Applicant has a total of 17 arrests and at least 6 convictions or deferred sentences. An applicant is here if you have questions for him.
Sir, would you like to come up to, I think board members would like to hear from you and ask you some questions. Make yourself comfortable and make sure that your microphone is turned on, please.
Could I ask Sarah a question real quick?
Sure.
Normally there's staff recommendations. Were there any submitted for this individual?
There was not, but if you would like to know, I think my personal is at this time to deny, but give them the opportunity to some type of probation or something like that. But at this time, my staff recommendation would be to not allow.
Thank you.
I think certainly we're all looking at for risks to the public. Anybody?
I'd just like to hear.
Go ahead.
Is there any reason?
Oh, so
I'd just like to hear you speak if
let's
okay.
go ahead and hear from you first. Just whatever you want to share with us for a moment, and then if you're open for questions, then that would be fantastic.
Okay. I realize what you're looking at is extensive, probably more than what you usually see. As you look through, you'll see that in my life I've had trouble with substance abuse. In the United States, substance abuse is a very real condition that a lot of people die from, a lot of people live with, and a lot of people end up finding a successful life and recovery from. I am in the successful life and recovery portion of this now. When I was younger, I had troubles. As you can see, that was in around 2000. My arrests were all stemmed around substance abuse. I sought recovery. I stayed sober for about 3 years, and I did well after that. I mean, completely sober for about 3 years, and then after that, I worked in oil and gas. I continued to live a pretty successful life. I had, in 2006, another arrest where I ended up getting in trouble for possessing a Xanax and steroid. After that trouble, I sobered up again. For some years, I did well. I continued to work in oil and gas. In 2016, that's the next arrest that y'all will see, or the next series of events. In 2016, I was in a car wreck. I had been drinking earlier that day. We had stopped drinking. Whenever I got into the wreck, my blood was taken, and it was at a .09. So I was still above the legal limit, but I had waited, but I didn't wait long enough. And so that's the next arrest that you'll see. I've been sober for 2 years now, from my last arrest, which was in 2022, October, to now. That was for possession of what I thought was a painkiller, but it was fentanyl. And I had used that drug, and it put me in the hospital. And that's the last time I ever used drugs after that. I've been sober, like I said, for over 2 years. As you can see, I've done inpatient treatment. I've done outpatient treatment. I've done halfway house sober living. I participate in AA. I have a sponsor. I've worked at 12 Steps. I have a great support group, and I also have changed my life. I have hope. And the reason I'm sitting before you is because I chose this path because I like helping people. My undergrad was psychology with a minor in biology. I worked in psych hospitals and other hospitals while I was going through that, and I found the passion of helping people was worth more than the money that I made in oil and gas. Whenever I chose to go into chiropractic, I chose to do so because I wanted to combine that passion and my education with a way to be able to support my life. In the year that I got to practice, I made some very good relationships, some very important relationships. I helped quite a few people. And now that I've recovered from opiate addiction, I look at that and I see a lot of my patients that struggle with opiates, that struggle with being on painkillers, and I can see that I have experience now that can help them with that. You know, aside from being able to offer a chiropractic adjustment, I can also offer experience in how to get off of those painkillers, how to live a life without having to be stuck on those painkillers.
What happened in 2023? April?
April of 2023 was when I was transferred from county jail to a substance abuse program in TDC.
Okay, so that.
That wasn't another arrest. There are a lot of things on this list that are transfer of probation, transfer of this, transfer of that. So there are quite a few things that.
I have a question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
This really doesn't have to do with you, but it's, when you applied to Parker, did they tell you that your prior arrest could affect you being able to get a license, or did they just say, no, we're going to?
They accepted me.
They never gave you a heads up?
No.
Oh. Okay, and I hope you understand why I'm saying that, because
Normally people come.
in some ways, in my opinion, it doesn't seem fair to you, because I assume you probably had student loans to get through school, that you had to get loans to get through school, that they never gave you the, quite frankly, the idea that there's a possibility with your arrest record you might not get a license. And they did not convey that to you at all.
So what I was told was, and now at the time that I applied, I had the arrest from whenever it was in 2000, and then the pending car wreck. And what I was told at the time was that because it was old and it didn't show a habitual offender type deal, I don't know how to say that, a repeated offense, that I would probably be able to get licensure.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that about what they told you.
Okay.
So you didn't understand that you could come before this board before you ever enrolled in chiropractic school?
No, I was told that I would probably be able to get a license because of how long ago it was. Now, since then, other things have come up, so I do understand, like, I'm not blaming them for that, but when we had that conversation when I enrolled in school, it was not, it was not a no, this is not going to happen for you.
Typically, you can come to before this board to kind of, before you go to school, and see if there's an opportunity to get a license, and that's why Dr. Bronson was asking that. That's
okay.
And I'm just trying to find out if they didn't let you know, which I don't think they did, that
no,
I just don't think that's correct. What they
What probation?
I am currently in a probation, yeah.
How long is that supposed to go out to?
So a total of 5 years. I'm 2 years into it, so another 3 years. I'm currently in a program where I get drug tested 2 times a week, and I've been passing that every time.
What have you been doing work-wise since you got out of chiropractic school?
So when I got out of chiropractic school, I worked at the joint for the allotted time that I could work under somebody's license. And then after that, I worked for the same company as a marketer for them. And then when I had my last trouble, since then, I've been working whatever I can do to kind of.
So you're telling me you have to get tested twice a week?
Twice a week at least.
What was your date of graduation from chiropractic school?
In August of 2021.
Do you have a plan for what you want to do if you get licensed? Who you're going to work for? What's your plan?
My plan is to try to go back to work for the joint in Richardson, Texas. That's where I was working when I left. I was working under Dr. Lovis's license, and I had a good withstanding relationship with them.
Yeah, I'm just going to get a little specific. I'm familiar with how the joints work. Do they ever run single doctors at a time, or is it a multi-doctor office? Is it big enough?
It just depends. The one that I'm at, they usually run 3 doctors at a time, but occasionally they do have clinics that are running 1 doctor at a time, depending on patient load.
Do they have cameras?
Yes. Yes.
You used the term recovered when you were talking about opioid addiction. And I'm not sure about opioids specifically, but I usually don't hear the term recovered, but recovering.
Okay.
Why did you use that term?
I feel like I've recovered parts of my life back. I know that recovery is an ongoing process, and that's why I continue to work the 12 steps with my sponsor. I don't know if I specifically meant to say recovered over recovering, but I do feel like I've recovered parts of my life back that I will also feel that.
Do you, are you an alcoholic?
I don't drink anymore because I'm an addict and I have issues with just about anything that's going to go ahead and lead me back down that road. So I would rather not drink. I would rather not even participate in anything that's going to put me in the position that I was in before.
How do we get information about the ongoing drug testing? Is that shared with us?
Dr. Leroy, you mentioned you're currently on probation. How long is that going to continue for?
Okay, so it was a 5-year extension, 5-year probation I signed for. I should have 3 years left come January, so 3.5 years left.
Okay, so it should end January 2028. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
And if need be, I can talk to my probation officer and get y'all drug test results.
Well, we would definitely want that.
So,
yeah.
Historically, we usually have to look for a period of time between the last offense and when we would agree to licensure, especially when there's been a pattern. So going with that, we would say it's probably a little soon, but I don't know that you need to wait a full 3 years to finish your probation either. I mean, a lot of times we will not grant a license until you've completed that probationary period, but I could definitely see a situation where we had the last 2 years run concurrently.
So I also think, though, and I would agree, this is unique situation. Sorry.
On paper, so
Well,
it's good to hear your
not only
explanation.
that, but
Thank you.
also, the amount of drug testing that he's currently going through, as well as the work situation that he's going to go into, because there's a lot of checks and balances, especially with the video recordings of the treatment areas. I think
It's hard to make a licensee.
I know.
Dependent on the employment situation.
Exactly, and that's the hard part is if you tell us that you're going to go to work for him, and we allow that, and then 6 months later you're working for somewhere else, and that situation has changed, and we don't have the control over the situation, because at the end of the day our job is to protect the public.
Yeah.
So this one's tricky. I agree with Dr. Henry that normally we want a little bit more time between the last. With probation, we want a little bit more time, but I feel like there's.
I would agree with that, but he's getting tested twice per week,
and that's more
so
than we've ever
you're
seen.
getting heavily. Since my time on this board, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody getting tested that much.
Yeah.
In October of 2022 was the last incident, correct?
That's the last incident, yeah. Anything past that is a transfer from one place to another, one entity.
I admire your sincerity a lot, and I think what really burns it for me is that Parker, with all due respect, they should have told you to come before this board first.
Okay.
And so that, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Wofford, I just wanted to mention, until like the last 2-3 years, Parker and TCC, I guess they were not quite aware of the criminal history evaluation.
Okay.
So we've been receiving more now that they're offering that to students. So they are informed of it now, but in the time that he enrolled, we
Probably
weren't
not.
receiving very many of
Okay.
them. Just thought I would let you know that.
If I could just ask a couple more questions on behalf of staff. Dr. Leroy, so just to clarify, you're not currently working for the joint, is that right?
No, not currently.
If I could just ask, I guess, a couple, they're a little bit more personal questions, so I apologize, but I think it's important that we kind of establish, you talked a little bit about your personal situation in regards of your support network. You said you have a lot of support around you to help you. Could you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so that was one of the big things. that I was told I needed to do while I was in treatment and when I got out, because most of my friends and most of the people I hung out with before I got into recovery were revolved around the people that I worked with before graduating school, and I was bartending. So that was my group of friends. I'm living in Plano, which is away from home, so my family wasn't around. So those were the people that I was trying to always be around. Or since I've been in recovery, my friends are all members of AA or Narcotics Anonymous. They're all sober. They're people that I've become friends with through support groups that I've gone to through either treatment or aftercare. I do have a few work friends from whenever, but everybody knows now. And I'm a lot more vulnerable now. When I was using, that's a big part of your life you hide and you don't talk about, and and now that I'm in recovery, I talk about it, and so the people that I want around me are the people that know, hey, don't even offer Brody a drink, don't talk, he doesn't want to be involved and stuff like that. And so those are the types of people, and that's where I met those types of people. So.
Okay. And in regards to your current employment situation, I know you said you're not with the Joint. Are you in anything chiropractic related at all, or?
No, I work for a wellness spa. They do all types of things, but it's mostly like a wellness spa type scenario. They have massage therapists and a few other things there. I'm just, working until I find out what my next move in life is going to be right now. This is kind of a holding pattern that I've been in.
Can you explain what those duties are?
Oh, so with them, I take care of, I'm in water quality. I take care of all the water for the spas. That's what I do. So nothing I do really pertains to any kind of treatment of the client. It's to make sure that the facility is, and the water in the facility in the spas is perfect for them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Lodroy, first and foremost, typically our job is to protect the public and the safety of the state of Texas. When I read your file earlier this week, I was very disappointed, but quite frankly, I'm very impressed with you. I want to say that. But if we choose to do this, there's going to have to be some conditions. We have to make sure that the public is protected. I personally would be okay with you getting a provisional license if there's ever a positive test, it's done. You know what I'm saying? Any arrest, it's done. Yeah. And I think testing, and I would have to ask Sarah if we can use the testing you're doing. It's got to be reported to Sarah, or if that goes away, testing no less than once a month. That is sent to us.
Released from probation early, we would still have to have testing for your license to stay active.
And I would say at least 2 years on that. And I'm not. Please hear where I'm coming from. Our job is to protect the public. If I weren't, with all due respect, so impressed the way I really feel that you've got a good heart and you care about your patients,
yes,
I wouldn't offer this.
Yes, sir.
So, in my mind, I'm gonna make a motion. Or Joe, is that all right? Can we do that?
You can go ahead and make a motion now. I did have a couple more questions.
We'll go ahead and do the questions.
Okay. So in regards to your support network, you're in the DFW area right now. Do you plan to stay there for the foreseeable future, assuming you get a license and you're able to go back working to was it the Joint that you said? Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of your long-term focus.
Yes.
Okay. The reason I ask is because if that's where your support network is, I think considering your history, it would be important to us that you kind of stay as connected to that group as possible.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree with you.
So in regards to substance abuse testing, we have some rules that allow for that for essentially people in your exact position, applicants who have had convictions for substance abuse offenses. Part of what the rule says is that the board may grant a probationary license to an applicant who agrees in writing to substance abuse testing and monitoring under our Rule 74.1. So, y'all obviously are free to make whatever motions you want, but just kind of my final thoughts on it would be, assuming that the board wants you to do that substance abuse testing, I think first what we would need is for you to go to your probation officer and clear that with her, that she has the legal authority to share that information with us. I assume she does, because we've done that in the past, but not every county is different, I think. So once we have that from her, we would want just kind of a simple statement in writing from you consenting to them sharing that information. And then in the event that your probation is dismissed early, that you would agree to then continue with additional testing for us for the length of, my assumption is that they'll probably condition this based on January 1, 2028 would be kind of the end date for your license probation with us. So we would want you to keep doing the testing for that whole time, even if your criminal probation ends early. And that's all I have. So, Dr. Wofford, go ahead.
One other provision I think I would like to throw in, and since you're going to be working at the clinic, that you work at a clinic with another licensed doctor there that could, I don't know if we put responsibility, but have a mentorship with you also.
Okay.
I don't know, how would you put that, Dr. Backham? I mean,
We'd have to have like a sponsoring licensee on file, I think. I don't know that-
can you do that, Sarah, if he's got a license? What to look in?
I feel like maybe there's been a situation like that before,
We've
so I
required
think
people
we
to not
could work something.
independent.
Yeah.
I think the big deal is that if you're in a small clinic off by yourself somewhere, the issues, if they came up, would be easier or would be more of a problem for you.
Right.
I know it sounds like we're asking a lot. We're trying to find a way, with all due respect, to
Yeah,
get
just
you
be
your
out of our
license.
normal
you
routine
know?
to do that.
And I appreciate it.
And so I'm going to make the motion that we allow this gentleman to sit the boards, but with the drug testing that is satisfactory to staff. And I'll let Mr. McLaughlin oversee the drug testing criteria. And at any time that there becomes an arrest or a positive or a failed drug test, that would be a revocation of the license.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that as part of that Rule 74.1, subsection G stipulates that the board may revoke the probationary license of any applicant who agrees to substance abuse testing and monitoring if the applicant fails to pass any test or provide required monitoring documentation. So just be aware of that's in the rule as well.
So I'd be willing to make that motion based upon the rule, and I'll let Mr. McLaughlin write that up because it's way above my pay grade.
Do you need a more specific motion on that, or are you guys?
Are you good with that motion, Joe?
And we're talking through January 1, 2028?
Whenever his probation is up.
Sorry, I've got two people talking
I'm
to me
sorry.
at the same
I would
time.
I would want that to run along with his probation. In other words, he would be under provisional or probationary license while he's on his probation also.
We would just pick 3.5 years because probation could change. Hopefully, you get released from your weekly.
Okay, yeah, run concurrent.
I hope you get released from that sooner, but we would require a minimum of monthly testing.
Okay.
To run through January 1st, 2028, as well as working with another licensee at all times, or with a sponsoring licensee. So we can interpret that however the rules committee wants, or the enforcement wants to do that.
Yeah, we can arrange that.
So is that clear? That yes, we're doing the timing to where if you're already doing your testing, you don't have to get another round of testing.
Gotcha.
But if they discontinue your testing, then you'll still have to at least do monthly testing through January 1st, 2028.
So what I understand is if they go less than once a month, then I need to make sure I satisfy once a month for y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
We've got our own requirement. We're just trying to not double up if you're already doing it.
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Chris,
Yeah,
what
I
was
think
your
that
question?
would do. That would take care of everything.
So the motion was made by Dr. Wofford and seconded by Dr. Backham, and we'll tidy up the wording of it.
Yes, please.
Tidy up the wording.
Before we go on, just one additional thought that staff has, in regards to if there's a need to, revisit this as far as the failure to pass a test or provide any required documentation, we would want to add just also that if there's any demonstrated substantiated allegations of any rule violations at all, that would be, the board would also seek revocation on that as well.
Yeah.
So, so basically what I'm saying there is obviously your license would be on probationary status. So if there was any sort of a rule violation not having anything to do with substance abuse, but let's just say for argument's sake, you were, then substantiated that you had committed insurance fraud or something like that, that's something we would go, normally on the first offense, we probably wouldn't go straight for revocation, but in this case, because the license would be probationary, we would be compelled to do that. So,
And that's pretty standard with probationary licenses, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how we address probationary licenses in general. So, so I think if I can reword Dr. Wofford's motion is that we would move to approve that Mr. Brody Leroy be able to sit for the jurisprudence exam and be granted a probationary license under the stipulations that he submit at least monthly drug testing through through January 1st, 2028, as well as work with another licensee in all, how would I say that one? Be sponsored by
licensee.
another licensee at all times during that probationary period.
And under the conditions that any other rule violations.
That if violating that probationary license with any rule violation or failure of a drug test, it would be immediately revoked.
Okay.
Clearer?
got it.
Couldn't say it
Not
better
great.
myself.
Oh, Sarah has a question. I'm sorry.
I'm good.
For the sponsoring licensee, is that an individual that we would need to select?
No, I
and
think
what
that
would
as
be
long
the
as he can-
qualifications?
If he has another licensee, any licensee that has a license in good standing can qualify for that.
Even if they've just been licensed a month?
I think that if they're willing to risk their license for that,
Okay. That's the only reason why I'm asking. I want to make sure that we're,
I think it's really just having somebody else there.
okay.
Yeah, so just
Another peer.
to clarify, it's having another licensee who's present in clinic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Present during any.
Staff should be able to contact and talk to that person at any time.
Yeah, but this one's, since it's, okay.
Yeah, I think two people's license on the line would probably be pretty motivating to.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Thank y'all.
Congratulations on your life moving forward.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Make us proud.
Can we just get the move-ins again real quick for the record? Who moved and who seconded?
Motion was made by Dr. Wofford and seconded by Dr. Baucom. The next group of agenda items, how are we doing? Anybody need a break? Move forward?
I actually only have the one agreed order, so if you want to go ahead and get through the,
Okay, let's do it. So the next group of agenda items pertains to matters of enforcement. A lot of this is just going to be me talking. As printed in the meeting agenda, I'll point out that the board only anticipates these enforcement matters will be ready for discussion and board action at this meeting. If the matters are not ready, they may be brought up at a later meeting. Agenda item number 8 calls for discussion and possible action on proposed final decision orders pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.555 and 22 TAC 81.10. And we have none for this meeting. Agenda item number 9 calls for discussion and possible action on proposed cease and desist orders pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.6015 and Texas Government Code 2001.056, and we have none for this meeting. Agenda item number 10 calls for discussion and possible action on default orders pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.0555, Texas Government Code 2001.056, 4, and 2001.058, D through L, and 22 TAC 81.6B. We have none for this meeting. Agenda item 11 calls for discussion and possible action on proposed agreed orders pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.504A1. Our Director of Enforcement, Joe, are you taking it or Chris Walling?
Do these.
Okay. So Joe will identify the licensee by name, the number, and the case number, and then provide us with relevant information. And following that, I'll entertain a motion and we'll vote. Joe?
Thank you, Dr. Bronson. All right. All I have for agenda item 11 is item 11B. The rest of them table for now. So agenda item 11B is TBCE case number 2024-074 in the matter of Dr. Kristen Renee Dedeaux, license number 15122. This case was investigated by Mr. Beach, who's present. So, if you have questions, he and I can address those. We want to try and keep any questions limited to what's within the four corners of this document, so there's not any ex parte considerations. But if you have any questions on what you're actually seeing in the document, we can answer those. So just briefly, this case arose out of a complaint the board received in February, alleging that the respondent doctor had participated in activity of a sexual nature with an identified patient. A lot of this was actually captured on camera, which of course is pretty substantial evidence. Board reviewed the information, including the clinic video footage, which did show the inappropriate contact between the doctor and the patient. Notice of complaint was sent to the respondent. However, no response was initially received. Investigator Beach attempted to contact respondent several times at the information listed in the board's database, but received no response. The case was initially reviewed by the enforcement committee, who gave directives to staff to seek license revocation. At that time, the respondent then contacted me, actually, as the first person she spoke with, and she denied the allegation. However, in the interests of resolving the matter, she agreed to whatever the enforcement committee's initial recommendations were. So, in the conclusions of law section, you can see under Occupations Code sections 201.502 A1 and 7. Board may essentially discipline a licensee for engaging in grossly unprofessional conduct. Here, the respondent licensee was observed and recorded participating in inappropriate conduct. So therefore, Occupations Code sections 201.502 A1 and 7 were violated. Additionally, Board Rule 79.1 subsection A1 provides for essentially the same violation, so that is also included as a violation as well. And then finally, Board Rule Section 80.1, subsections A, B, F, and H collectively require a licensee to fully cooperate with the board investigation. And here, respondent failed to respond to the notice of complaint sent to the information we had on file, and so therefore, respondent was found to be in violation of Rule 80.1. Regarding the order itself, respondent is ordered to pay an administrative penalty of $1,000 to the board within 6 months of the effective date of the agreed order, and license to be placed on suspended status for a period of 3 months, and followed by a term of probation for 1 year. And then finally, respondent required to take and pass the EBAS examination boundaries section at respondent's expense within 6 months of the effective date of the agreed order. Staff recommendation is that the board approve the agreed order, and I'm here to answer any questions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Dr. Henry, seconded by Dr. Wofford. Any discussion, board members? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Let's see, we just have 13 in the rules, but can we take a break before that?
Is that it, Joe?
That's it for agenda item 11, Dr. Bronson. If you want to go ahead and read 12 into the record, but we don't.
I'm going to read 12 into the record, and then I have a request for a quick break. Agenda item number 12 calls for discussion and possible action on required suspension or revocation of licenses for certain offenses pursuant to Texas Occupations Code 201.5065, and we have none for this meeting. So when we come back, we'll move into board policy discussions. The Time is 10:22 a.m. here on August 1st, 2024, and we're going to recess for 15 minutes. Microphone on. The board will now reconvene into open session. The time is 10:42 a.m. on August 1st, 2024. Board policy discussions. Agenda items under this heading include topics which we have, for various reasons, become worthy of discussion. Our discussion of these items in open meetings is a way for us to share information with each other on issues that don't necessarily warrant rulemaking but deserve our attention. This is everyone's opportunity to thoughtfully consider these topics, ask questions, and offer comments. The board may discuss but take no formal action on these items today. Although no rule proposals will be considered today, the board may direct the staff as a result of the discussions. So agenda item number 13 is reserved for a presentation on RCSP, Recognized Chiropractic Specialties Programs, a service offered by the FCLB to assist licensing boards in evaluating chiropractic specialties for recognition. The service was created in response to a request by several member boards who apparently had received complaints of certain licensees claiming to be certified, board certified, or otherwise being qualified as specialists in certain areas of chiropractic service. These jurisdictions realized a need to ensure that the public isn't misled by false claims of specialty qualification, hence superiority. Here with us today to present this topic would be Dr. Karen Campion, formerly on this board and currently the president of the FCLB, but she couldn't make it today. So we made sure that you had the materials that were presented to me at the Phoenix event, and so there you have it. We heard from Dr. Tullius, representing the Chiropractic Society of Texas, and I spoke with him a moment ago. The presentation was drafted ahead of this meeting, and he presented it. So, as I mentioned, RCSP, created in response to some state jurisdictions who wanted this. It's not something that is new in concept. This is something that the ACA has done some of. I think probably the ICA has also done some of, and continues those efforts to create some sort of a structure in specialties within the profession. And I remind everyone that it was this board's recognition of certain specialties that prompted not just one lawsuit, but probably two. And I think that recognition at that time was a bit different from what we have possible today. One, those two lawsuits are behind us. Obviously, we don't want to do the same thing that would prompt another one. But in context, and considering what our needs are at this time, then I hope that the board considers this. And I'm not asking to rush into a rule, but consider the possibilities here and the benefits that it would provide us. Specifically, it would provide us with some oversight into programs that our licensees use to put letters after their name. Nothing wrong with a bunch of letters after your name, but using the term board certified in something, and then if I see that and I look it up and there's no such entity, then I think that's misleading the public.
Don't we have rules in place to address that?
I bet you know better than any of us if we do.
Anyone who uses a specialty or claims that has to say what licensing board they use. So if one doesn't exist, I would say that falls under false advertising.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, Dr. Henry. Of course, it was our answer to satisfying our needs without officially recognizing any specialties. And back to what I said, how it spawned lawsuits. Why? Well, because board recognized the acupuncture specialty, and the licensed acupuncturists organization didn't want chiropractors doing acupuncture at all, and so there was that lawsuit. The recognizing the different boards for neurology, the medical neurologists had odds with that, and so inherent turf conflicts there. So while our current rule might be just fine to satisfy our needs, I would suggest that we take a look at it and keep an open mind on if it would further improve our monitoring of the profession and ensuring that the public is not misled. Because, and I say that because right now, yes, our rule is in place. The way it's written seems to be pretty good, yet we look out there and there's all sorts of false claims being made. I run into it all the time. And with that, I'll open up discussion, if there is any.
If you'll just indulge me for a minute, just to give you a little bit of a background on what we have on the books right now, just for y'all to have context. There's advertising is mentioned in a few places in Chapter 201, our governing statute. In 201.502, which, as I'm sure many of you know, that's kind of that laundry list of, and that was one of the initial sections of disciplinary actions that was put into Chapter 201 when it was first written back in the 40s. It states that essentially the board can discipline someone, a licensee, for using an advertising statement that is false or that tends to mislead or deceive the public. And that's kind of the generally accepted language that goes into statutes and rules when it comes to regulating advertising. There's also the prohibition on advertising professional superiority, which can be implicated in these issues as well. But it's important to also note Section 201.155. It does note that the board is prohibited from adopting rules restricting advertising except to prohibit false, misleading, or deceptive practices. So the legislature's pretty firm on that. That obviously, and you've probably heard Christopher talk about this, my predecessor, but that goes to wanting to be mindful of First Amendment protections. Commercial speech is regulated a little bit differently than political free speech, of course. It's not quite as strongly protected, and I'm by no means a First Amendment expert. so I couldn't really go into a lot of detail on the nuances of that distinction, but just suffice it to say it's not protected quite as strictly. Political free speech is basically absolutely protected. You can say almost anything other than like hate speech or trying to incite, a riot. With commercial speech, you can kind of regulate it a little bit more narrowly, but there's still some pretty broad protections. Just a little kind of a random anecdote, in law school, in professional responsibility, they teach you a lot about lawyer advertising, and you learn a little bit about the history of how lawyer advertising was regulated. People like to make fun of commercials you see on the TV nowadays, but it didn't used to be like that. My understanding is back in the 60s and 70s, lawyers couldn't advertise at all. It was basically word of mouth. You could hand out a business card and that was basically it. And so you see over time how that's kind of broadened. And I think that's a trend that's probably, across all professions. You've seen sort of over time a little bit of a loosening of advertising regulations. So as far as our own rule, Dr. Henry, I'm sure, is familiar with 77.3. We have, again, 77.1, which prohibits false, misleading, deceptive advertising. 77.3 goes into a little bit more detail on this subject. Subsection E states that a licensee shall identify by name any board certifying the licensee's professional credentials in any public communication or advertising using the term board certified. So, as best as I can remember from, when Christopher was working on this back in probably 2021, I think the general policy behind it is that we want to promote transparency by the licensees. Tell the public what it is you're saying that you're the so-called expert in, and then kind of let the public make the decision from there. Whether that's the policy you want to continue is up to you. But my 2 cents on it is, I'm inclined to, as the lawyer, err on the side of caution because of what Dr. Bronson noted with the lawsuits. I do think that this has the potential to kind of lead back down that road a little bit, while also acknowledging, as Dr. Bronson said, that this program was prepared by regulators. And in the packet that we received, that we shared, sub-item B includes actually proposed drafting language for statutes and for rules. And I think it's really important to note that they included statutory language. It might be something that we decide that the legislature needs to speak on before we can do anything. That's part of what the FCLB, I think, was considering when putting this all together. So that's just a lot of words I threw at you just to try and give you some context. I don't really have any official guidance on it at this point, but I just wanted to kind of say all that up front. So if anybody wants to...
Yeah, I want to... since my time on this board, I've seen supposedly, with all due respect, made up specialties. I've even seen where they would form a corporation to create a specialty to certify themselves. I've seen that done. And I think it's dangerous. But also, I don't want to just overwhelmingly accept, I understand the FBLC or
FCLB.
Yeah. They're trying to kind of create a regulation, but I think we've got to be cautious also in what you just said on anything we look at. I certainly don't want to get in another lawsuit per chance, and we've got to find a way to protect the public. Quite frankly, I would, before I can make any decisions, and I appreciate your presentation earlier, although I do, with all respect, take a little offense to the incestuous relationships you stated, because I promise you there is none. And I think you said that out of haste and not out of accuracy. And that's my opinion, and we can talk about it whenever you like after that. I think that's a very accusatory statement, and I do take a little offense to that personally, because I personally would not jump on any bandwagon, even with the FCLB or anybody, until we had really good, proper presentation from everybody involved. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. I think my concern with this is that, yes, apart from some of the language used in that CST statement, there were some valid points there.
Absolutely.
I don't want to create a situation where there are other specialty boards that are completely legitimate, that because we've delegated our authority to only approve FCLB
Yeah.
recognition,
I
that
agree.
we can't consider those. And so I'm just real hesitant without changing our entire structure on how we look at specialties. And if this board wants to become somebody who vets specialty programs, well, that would be the direction I would take if we wanted to go to recognizing specialties, which I don't know that we do. So I think our current rule does give us protection there, at least transparency.
I just want us to be careful, open a can of worms
I
that we
agree.
can't.
Yeah, that's
you
kinda
know,
where I'm at
might
on
be
it, too.
Kind of,
Yes.
I don't know.
I'm certainly fine lagging behind the direction that the profession takes this. As a regulatory board, I don't want to jump in ahead or even stay in this
Somebody
at
else
the
make
same
the
speed. Yeah, let it pan out, and then we adapt as it turns out to be necessary for rules. I'm certainly fine with that. But before any of you latch on to your preconceived notions, look at it more closely. Because even Dr. Henry, some of the things that you just said, I don't think are valid. And I may have been not hearing you accurately, but to say that there might be a legitimate program out there that doesn't or that isn't FCLB approved or doesn't have the opportunity, I think the way that it's designed is that they're all going to have the opportunity. All they have to do is apply. And if FCLB is one of their first things to do was to go to the national organizations and ask for endorsement. And this is, as far as I know, the only organization that's doing this that has been endorsed by both the ACA and the ICA. And I think that statement is accurate the way it is right now. Don't hold me to it, but that's the idea, is that they're seeking to represent the entire profession and not just certain factions of it, inclusive rather than exclusive.
And I think if we see a track record of them doing that for a while, I would definitely reconsider that.
Right. They were hoping to get as many jurisdictions and all jurisdictions signed on to it to create a to create a system similar to the medical profession and the other professions, and some standardization, in other words, and we're all about that as well. So anyway, I'm fine if y'all want to talk some more.
Yeah, I just had a comment that I think that would be my biggest concern, is just the educational standards, and making sure that there's some kind of standardization with what, because right now, as it stands, I mean, with some of the diplomates, there are different requirements across diplomates, and I feel like if we're going to go down this road and, just coming from the enforcement side of it, I feel like that would open us up a lot if the educational standards weren't consistent from one specialty to the next.
Well, that's the benefit of it.
Yeah.
Here's an organization that will require certain standards, and when you look at the materials that have been given you, you'll see the whole the criteria in order to be approved. That's something that we don't want to do. We don't have the manpower. We don't want to do it. There's all of the legal issues of us trying to do that, I think, might be more risky than saying, okay, we're going to adopt. That's the whole reason that we got into national board as opposed to us doing the testing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm ready to move on unless y'all want to talk more.
Just for my own, I guess, edification, just a couple questions. For lack of a better term, did they have like a go live on this program, like a date that this was supposed to start kind of going into action, or is that still kind of off in the future a little bit?
I don't think there's a set date for going live with it. I think they're trying to solicit as many endorsements as possible from the different state jurisdictions. And right now there are, and I'm afraid I'm not even going to give a number.
That was my next question. Do you know of any states that have implemented
Yes, there
it?
are some who have adopted this in rule.
Okay.
I just don't know how many, and I don't even want to say it. I don't want to guess.
Sure.
That Dr. Campion would tell us if she were here. So we would not be the first. But it is, I know that it's less than half of the states who have adopted it in rule, but it appears to be a trend. And I think that it will gain more traction as the holdout jurisdictions express their concerns, and then they
Show us.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to violate those concerns.
Right. Okay. So let's just have this serve as an introduction, and we're good, right? Anybody else? The next heading on our agenda would allow the board to act on rules for proposal. I'll introduce each item individually as it is listed on the agenda and call on our general counsel, Mr. Joseph McLaughlin, for his advice on the purpose of these rule proposals and to answer questions from the board. We'll consider each item separately, including any action, before moving to the next item. Agenda item 14 calls for discussion and possible action on proposing the repeal and replacement of a rule relating to board fees, license applications, and renewals, 22 TAC 72.1 fees. Mr. McLaughlin.
All right, time to do my best Christopher impression. Agenda item 14 is a proposal for repealing and replacing 72.1, our current fees rule. This is really just kind of correcting a typo. This is actually something Patrick kind of let me know of that he had noticed basically on his way out. But if you look at the current rule, it's basically all of subsection A, and then there's a list of 19 different fees that we charge. And for whatever reason, when this was getting updated with the Secretary of State's office, we skipped 15. So Patrick just kind of said, hey, you might want to fix this. So that's what we're doing here. You should have in your materials basically a redlined version. And if you open up that document, the first part that you're seeing is the redlined version, and then there's the current version, which is clean, obviously no edits. So there were there was one other typo that I noticed looking through the current version. And this is just, my editor brain popping out. But if you look at subsection 4, there's 2 hyphens or in dashes between the subparts A, B, and C, and then the numbers, the actual fees, the dollar amounts. And one of them there's 2 of them together. One of them was missing. So I said, well, if we have the opportunity, we might as well correct that as well. Otherwise, the only edits are going to be adding number 15 and then changing 16, 17, and 18, correcting that discrepancy. So that's really all it is. Like I said, just purely typographical fixes. So staff recommendation is that you vote to propose the repeal and replacement of 72.1 as discussed.
And remind me, in a situation like this, the reason we're doing repeal and replace versus amendment is so that we could restart the timer on when we have to look at this again?
Exactly.
Then, so moved.
Second. Motion, sorry, Dr. Mix. Motion was made by Dr. Henry and a quick second by Dr. Wofford. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. I have a feeling that you'll have a chance here in a minute if Dr. Wofford will be a little slower.
I'll be glad.
Agenda item 15 calls for discussion and possible action on proposing the repeal and replacement of a rule relating to complaint procedures. 22 TAC 80.2 complaint procedures. Joe?
All right, we can go ahead and up the degree of difficulty just a little bit. So 80.2, this is something that enforcement has discussed. So Dr. Bauckham and Dr. Neal and Mr. Hollab, as well as enforcement staff, please feel free to chime in on anything. But the idea here is we would like to add a couple more subsections, or subparts rather, in subsection E, which delegates from the board authority to the executive director to dismiss complaints in certain specific circumstances. So, oftentimes when the enforcement committee is, meeting and discussing cases, we'll have situations where we want to go ahead and close a case. Obviously, we don't want to take any disciplinary action, but the question is sort of like, well, how do we want to close this? What is the final disposition? And so what you see in subsection E, that numbered list, it's currently 5 options. Those are the actual case dispositions that we put in the database. And so if legislature or governor's office, someone was to ask us, like, okay, or auditor's office, how did you close this specific case? That's what we're looking at, and then we would cite to this rule and say this is the authority to close it without needing the enforcement committee to actually meet and evaluate it. So currently, what we have is non-jurisdictional complaints, situations where the complainant is uncooperative with the investigator. They don't really provide any additional information after filing their complaint, and so we can't therefore fully investigate. Number 3, when they withdraw their complaint. This will happen a lot where they're alleging some sort of a billing issue, and then the doctor goes ahead and just refunds them, and then they just agree to withdraw the complaint. So we go ahead and just close it on our end at that point. Number 4, insufficient evidence. So this is really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty for the investigators of determining whether they feel like there's actually facts to make the case. And a lot of times this boils down to if we can make the case at SOA, for example, our version of having to go to trial to take action against someone's license. And then number 5, there'll be situations where obviously there's a parallel law enforcement criminal investigation going on, and we always, as a policy, our board wants to stay out of their way. We let criminal go first. So, if us somehow sending a notice of complaint, for example, would tip them off that something's going on, we don't want to screw up the law enforcement investigation. So those are the current 5 reasons. Now we want to add 2. Number 6 would be, and this comes up a lot now, which is, I think, is a good thing, and I think Dr. Bauckham would agree. In situations where the allegation is something relatively minor, perhaps an advertisement that's not fully compliant with our rules, and particularly in a situation where the licensee might not even realize that what the allegation is out of compliance. But when we let them know by sending them the notice of complaint, they're very cooperative and responsive to the investigator. They call the investigator, I didn't realize this was a problem. How do I fix this? They implement the change. The investigator can see it and can confirm it. They're not getting any pushback. We feel that in those situations, as a matter of proper allocation of agency resources and, for lack of a better term, prosecutorial discretion on our part, that we would like to be able to close those cases by stating that typically this is going to be against a licensee, but I could see certain circumstances where it might be an unlicensed individual, that they have attained compliance. We, in the past, were sort of informally closing these cases, closed for compliance was what we would put in our database. But Walling pointed out that, we don't actually have that in the rule, so we really need to. So that's the idea behind number 6. And then number 7, this was something that we kind of just actually were talking about a couple days ago on enforcement. But there are situations where we want to be able to close a case administratively when a licensee, in the course of the investigation, we discover that their license is expired and it actually lapses and becomes non-renewable. In the past, we've sort of treated that as, they don't have a license anymore. There's probably not much. Typically, when that happens, they're not practicing at all. There's probably not a real reason for us to keep digging in on this, and there's not really a reason to waste time trying to achieve a legal resolution on someone who probably doesn't care at all. They might have moved on to something completely different professionally. So number 7 would be giving us the authority to close a case in a situation where the license has lapsed into non-renewable status. So it would probably, in shorthand in the database, it would probably be something like closed for non-renewal, and that would actually close out the case. So that's the idea behind this rule. Staff recommendation is that you vote to propose the repeal and replacement of Rule 80.2 as discussed, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
I just have a real quick question on on number 6, the first new one that you mentioned. That would give y'all the discretion to implement it, but it wouldn't be required. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
In other words, you don't want someone to put something, change a word or two, and then the minute you say something, change it, and then play this game back and forth. You'd
Right.
be able to use discretion. And
Yeah, we would want to document that any necessary changes were implemented. A lot of times, if they go ahead and hire an attorney, the attorney will actually provide that for us, just like as proof, like, hey, we did this. This is in compliance now. So that would be part of our internal enforcement policy. But certainly also, if someone tried to pull a bait and switch on us, we can always just reopen the case anyway. We would have grounds to.
You
So.
have multiple complaints where it's not a first offense kind of thing.
Right, and yeah, this would have,
Helps a lot there.
Yes, so Dr. Mix, as Dr. Henry's indicating under E, under E, the board's executive director may, and that means he or she can if they want to, but as opposed to a shall.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You'll always look for may and shall. It's there a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would move that we accept staff recommendations to propose this language for repeal and replace.
Motion was made by Dr. Henry and seconded by Mr. Holub. Sorry, I'm migrating directly into the microphone. It's not necessary, right? Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Agenda item number 16 calls for discussion and possible action on proposing the repeal and replacement of a rule relating to continuing education. 22 TAC 73.5, requirements for claiming continuing education as a national board examiner. And so, Mr. McLaughlin.
All right. So our last rule to discuss for today. So our current 73.5 is pretty short, and basically the point of it is it allows any licensee who's serving as an examiner to receive 8 hours of CE credit for participating as an examiner. For Part 4 only. Now, this proposal was something that one of the instructors at Parker University brought to our attention, but obviously, as we all know, the NBC exams have been undergoing a pretty significant revamp over the last, what has probably been a couple years now at least. And she had served on one of the committees that was working on one of those the development committee, essentially. And so, she had questioned whether she could get credit for having done that. Kind of it's somewhat similar concept to administering the test. You're also helping to create the test. And under the current text of the rule, I would say, I don't believe you can. And so, this was a proposal to, amend the current rule. So we went ahead and took a stab at a draft. So this is going to have some more significant changes relative to the two rules we just looked at, so I'll go through them step by step. So obviously we would need to change the title. So a proposed new title would be requirements for claiming continuing education credit as a national board examiner or test development committee participant. If that's the proper language or not. Subsection A would be amended to add that a licensee who serves as an examiner or test development committee participant for the NBCE exams may receive up to 8 hours of CE credits each year for the licensee participation. So you'd note this would be striking out the Part 4 examination language. Obviously, there's other parts to the exam that have been developed as well, so we would want to allow for credit for serving on those committees as well. Subsection B, the change there is just going to be licensee claiming hours as an examiner or test development committee participant for the NBCE shall submit written verification. That's mostly just adding in test development committee to participant and then kind of rearranging the wording a little bit to make it read smoother. And then finally, subsection C, the written verification that's requested in B, we're adding in place of participation in lieu of the statement of examination. So that's the rule in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions. No, I'm sorry. Staff recommendation is that you propose the repeal and replacement of Rule 73.5 as discussed.
So moved.
Motion was made by Dr. Henry, seconded by Dr. Neal. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. The next heading on our agenda would allow the board to act on rules for adoption, but we have none for this meeting, so we'll move to the next item. And agenda item 17 allows the board to meet in closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, 551.073, 551.074, 551.076, 551.088, or 551.089, if related to the agenda items above as necessary. And since we don't have a reason to meet in closed session today, we'll move to the next topic, which of course takes us towards our finish line. Agenda item number 18 allows board members an opportunity to request future agenda items. And before you bring something up, I want to say the November meeting is actually going to be in October on Halloween morning at 9:00 a.m., October 31st. And I think in this room, is that correct? Okay. I'm thinking CE credit for any licensee showing up wearing a costume. Okay. As Dr. Henry indicated earlier, we anticipate having several rule proposals on the agenda for the November board meeting. Maybe not.
I see your list there. We'll do our best on a few of those.
This is an ambitious list.
That's not
Dr.
the list for
Henry.
next meeting. That is our future list that we're going to be working toward.
Right. So I don't want you throwing punches.
Yeah.
So
I think our first one on the agenda is going to be to get the CE rule up to date, and then we're going to kind of work our way down from there.
Okay.
CE and then business
Practices.
business practices.
Yeah, we've already done those stakeholder meetings. The other two are going to, the acupuncture and scope of practice rules are probably going to involve a little more stakeholder input things to
Right.
address.
So, yeah, we had one stakeholders meeting on continuing education. We need to talk about it and see if there's a need for another one. The prepaid treatment plans rule, which is under the heading of business practices. Are y'all talking about changing that up?
Yeah, there's a lot of other prepay and post-pay and credit arrangements out there now, so that's going to be a little bit bigger change up.
Mm-hmm. And then the acupuncture rule.
Haven't even started looking at it yet.
And then the scope of practice rule.
And then we're just going to be reviewing those rules. We're not necessarily going to be changing them, but they are up for review by statute, and so we will go through the review process on both of those rules as soon as is feasible.
Okay, thank you.
We did discuss recently a staff directive to figure out how to get CE hours for our docs who attend these meetings. A certain number of hours seemed appropriate, and I think we can do that without rulemaking by creating a CE category for these meetings. Is that right, Jennifer? I know we discussed it. What would need to be done to where we could create a 2-hour CE credit for each board meeting attended and advertise that or promote that?
Account for board members too?
It would.
Are you wanting it to count as general hours or as part of the board hours?
I think general hours, since we're not going to be specifically reviewing all rule changes at each meeting.
I think there would need to be something in rule,
Okay.
either on the category or something like the part 4.
Okay.
Like
So
a
I think we'd like
potentially
to
standalone.
Yeah.
add that to our drafted rule list. Similar to working on the NBC exams, is that when docs are learning about how the regulatory side works, I think it's useful, at least for a couple of hours of CE. Including us. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else on that? Anybody? Future items? Agenda item number 19 allows me to accept a motion to adjourn.
You're on this one, not.
Second.
Who did it? Joshua Holub made the motion to adjourn.
Dr. Mix.
Dr. Mix seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? The time is 11:22 a.m. on August 1, 2024, and we are adjourned.